It's been 1 year since I decided to grab a 3D printer and start teaching myself a new skill. A few weeks after, I was able to share my first version of a 3D printed sim rig interior, and in the first 5 months, I must have reprinted most of the parts 2 or 3 times just to perfect things I thought could be better. By July, I was confident enough to say I was going to be able to build the most visually immersive sim rig using a standard triple monitor setup, and thus, Cup Car 2.0 was born. This was never about what gear I could bolt to a cockpit, or what it was going to look like from the outside. Cup Car 2.0 was about bringing real motorsport heritage and unique 3D designs together to create a truly immersive sim racing experience. It's a lot of work to solve a problem that VR already has, but for me, the journey is just as important as the result. After several months of planning and work, I've finally reached the stage of Cup Car 2.0 that's going to define the success of the entire build. Over the next couple videos, I'll be building the final enclosure that'll be used for this rig and the future Huracan build. If you've ever wondered how far you could go with some foam, a 3D printer, and some aluminum profile, then get comfortable, because you're about to find out. One of the biggest things lacking on my sim rig builds up to this point has been a believable enclosure. They've always felt pieced together, they lack detail, and altogether just the combination of scraps that I was using just wasn't selling it for me. So now I'm finally ready to solve this problem. So I'm going to use some foam, a 3D printer, and a little bit of aluminum profile to build the most authentic and realistic sim racing interior you guys have ever seen. We're talking maximum levels of overkill on this one. The biggest 3D printed project I've done yet. But before we get into that, there's some framework that's got to be done. For this part of the build, I decided to use 2020 aluminum profile to frame out the entire passenger side. For the base of this frame, I used 2 pieces of 500mm aluminum profile and attached 2 1220mm pieces to the sides, making the entire frame 540mm wide by 1260mm long. For the height, I used 400mm uprights. Then on top, I added another 540 by 1260 frame with a 500 by 500mm subframe at the back. You guys will understand why later in the video. And then in the center of each, you can see they're supported by 500mm and 1220mm aluminum profile down the middle. So now that the frame's in place, I'm going to show you guys my process for designing the most complicated and detailed 3D print project I've done for Cup Car 2.0 so far, the floorboard. As I mentioned in the beginning, I've pretty self-taught on 3D printing and design. I've only been doing it for about a year, so I may not have the best methods, but I'm going to show you guys my process for designing this floorboard. So first I start with a base board. I'm going to save this board and use it for every piece of the 10 pieces I need to design to make this floorboard. That way I'm consistent. I know that this board is 270mm wide. My aluminum profile base is 540, so if I print 2 of these, I get the exact width of the base. This is 250mm tall, so I know that I need to go to 1000mm. So if I cut it into 5 pieces at 250mm tall each, then I'll be able to cover the full 1000mm length of it. Essentially, I'll come back to this base after every design. Now, in order to start making this look believable in a sense, I'm going to start by making just some little shapes and things like that I can cut into the board with. Go over here to a boolean modifier, cut that out of there, and that gives me just a little concave. Now, because this is going to be the rear panel, this is about where the seat mount's going to go, so I might do something like that. Come over here to the editor, and basically all I'm doing now is making a mount for my seat that's never actually going to be used, because we're not going to put a passenger seat in. We just want it to be convincing enough to look like you could put a passenger seat in there. But now we need something else on the plate to just be a little bit convincing that this is actual raw metal. So we'll put a little bit of a cutout in here. You can see that gives a little more texture to the floor deck. Doesn't make it one solid piece. It could be anything that goes underneath the passenger side seat of a car. The point is, it just needs to look like something was supposed to be there. So once I finish the first piece, I export it as an STL file, and then I can import it. So we'll bring in inside back 1, and I know that it's 270mm off of that piece. So now I can start building the second back piece. As you can see, I've aligned everything. So now I can match this piece to this piece. A couple things I have to consider is that if I've got a seat mount over here, then I had to match one over here. Of course, I want continuity in this long strip right here. And because this is the side that's going to be up against the door, it needs to have some kind of a trim. And then once that piece is done, I can export that one, import it next to a blank piece again, and just continue designing each individual piece until I have one complete floorboard. And of course, need an ECU box. And then I have a full passenger side build out that's cohesive. You can see how the continuity throughout the rig. I've got seat mounts, got a spot for cables. I've got some just miscellaneous things in here to make it believable. Like most of this won't even be used. None of the concaves, none of that. But if it was just flat, it wouldn't be believable. But because of how it's designed, it works pretty well. So now we can get these printed and I can start getting them put on the rig. Now it took about 60 hours and almost 4 rolls of filament to get the passenger side printed, but it's pretty much done. I say pretty much done because this entire print process has been plagued with issues because I need to do some maintenance on my printer, and I've had the parts on order but they're taking way too long to get here. So on the final piece, I actually had my filament bind up because I need to replace the Bowden tube. You guys can see it didn't print the last little section here. I'm going to go ahead and put this piece on the rig anyways, and I'll reprint it at a later time. But I have some other stuff I want to work on getting printed this week. So I'm not going to make this a priority necessarily right now, because I think it'll work just fine for the purposes of this video. To assemble the floorboard, I started at the back and worked my way forward. What I should have actually done is started in the middle so alignment was a little bit easier and I wouldn't have had to move the parts. And in the course of building the frame, I had already inserted all of the T-nuts I needed in place so I wouldn't have to take anything apart to get them in there. So installing the panels was just a simple process of aligning the holes with the T-nuts, getting the bolts in place, and then positioning the panel before tightening it down. Now earlier in the video I mentioned a raised subframe, and now you guys can see how that plays into this. Because the seat usually sits on some kind of support brace, I wanted the mounting deck for what would be a seat to be a little bit higher than the actual floorboard. So I wanted to give it a little bit of a slope, and you guys can see that there's about a 50mm difference between the seat deck and the actual floorboard. I feel like this just gives it a little more depth than if it was just one big flat panel. And also when I'm running cables and stuff, it'll just make it look that much more believable. And then towards the back half, everything was really locking in place, and I felt like it would have been a lot of work to get a second bolt in on the right side, so I ended up just leaving one bolt per piece on the last 2 panels. It just, with all of the supports and everything in there, it would have been a lot of work to try to get those bolts in, and they're not going to support any weight or do anything, so they'll stay in place just fine the way they are with a single bolt. Then for the ECU box, for right now that's just going to sit in place while I wait to get all my cable management done, because there's going to be an actual function to the box and it will have leads running into it, which will not only make it authentic, but it'll help with the cable management side of the rig. With the floorboard installed, you guys can see first off, I really need to reprint this piece. You guys can definitely see that there's a big difference between the two, but I will get to that at some point. For right now, let's focus on accessorizing. So to make this believable, it needs a mix of things on it. First off, I will actually be using these wire looms at some point. For now, I'm just going to install them so you guys get the idea. And honestly, it's just going to add a little something extra to it. So I've got a wire loom for that spot. And got another one that I'm going to put right up here. Tuck that up in. And I actually want these to be fairly visible, because on an actual race car, you would see open wire loom. I'm just going to feed that right into the hole there. And in a minute, I'll zip tie this side to the panels in 2 spots. It'll give it a nice tight look. This side, I'll have to reprint a couple clamps and screw them in, which I think will actually make it look a little more authentic with some bolts in there. So we'll get to that at a later time. And then the cherry on top, a fire extinguisher. Now I could stop here for this video because this is the main thing that I wanted to build for the rig today, but it wouldn't be a proper video if we didn't take a test drive, and it wouldn't be a proper test drive if the rig wasn't fully enclosed. So in the same fashion that I built a roof out of foam, I've used 2-inch insulation foam to build an enclosure so we can take a proper test drive. Now for the time being, I've used a laminate wrap on the outside and on the inside, but I've got big plans for the inside. The outside's pretty much going to stay this way, except it's missing one thing. Just a little trim work to finish it off. All right, so to do this test drive, I decided to throw some Govee lighting over on the passenger side just to try to match it up a little bit with what I have going above my head. And I just want to get a feel for how the whole rig is coming together so far. And I will tell you, that partially printed piece on the floorboard is much more annoying than I anticipated it being. Like, it's throwing off my vibe. Like, when I just glance over, I could see the partial print and it's driving me crazy. So that's going to be reprinted a lot sooner than I planned on, because as much as I didn't expect it to bother me, it really does. As far as the rest of the floorboard, though, it feels pretty good. You know, we had to come to Nürburgring to check out how the ambient lighting system was doing. I just love the shadows in this track. I think this is the best way to test them and see if everything's meshing well. The lights above my head are definitely a little bright, but I don't know how that's going to translate on camera. And there's definitely a lot of work that needs to happen over on this passenger side still with the center console, and then of course I need a driver's side door. But peripherally, the vibe is a lot better. Like, if I glance over around a corner and see a fire extinguisher and a realistic floorboard, that's definitely starting to do the trick for me. Like, I think the whole thing came out great. I just wish that one piece had finished printing. So as soon as I get this video uploaded, the parts for the 3D printer finally showed up, so we're gonna get to work on fixing that little tidbit. And then I can start printing the floorboard for this driver's side. Oh. Too focused on glancing around the car and checking things out to focus on racing right now. Oh, that feels good though. Like, I am really stoked about that. And you know, every time I make an improvement, I get excited, but like, that's a legit floorboard in the sim rig. All right, so we made a lot of progress with Cup Car 2.0 this week. I'm really stoked about the direction it's heading. I'm hoping for the next update video, I can make some big progress on the center console and make this look a little more cohesive and kind of bring it all together. And of course, I've got the whole floorboard for the driver's side planned out, so I can start working on getting that printed and give you guys that in the next update. And I still need a driver's side door because this makeshift thing I got going on over here isn't working for me. If you guys haven't gone and checked out our sponsors and you're in the market for anything sim racing related, make sure you go give them some love down in the description. And until next time, I'll see you guys out on the track.